Hello everyone and welcome to a very special Fight and Focus ahead of the March 6th AEW event, Revolution, which comes to you live at 8 p.m. Eastern Time internationally with AEW Plus on FITE. That's right, check the app, check to make sure it's available in your market. I'm Josh Shernoff and my guest is a man who needs no introduction but has earned the right to have one, so here we go. He's a multi-time world champion, the first ever AEW World Champion. He's the leader of the Inner Circle, the Demo God, Le Champion, the Influencer, and as we heard this past Wednesday night, the big one. Please welcome to Fight and Focus, Chris Jericho. Chris, thank you so much for being here.
That's quite the list of catchphrases that I have, but I'm glad you remembered all of them. Thank you. I have to keep a list so that I remember all of them too.
Yeah, I heard you're good with lists. There we go. I was going to run down your list of accolades, but that was significantly longer. It was kind of neck and neck with catchphrases, but that's something I want to jump right in to talk to you about. How you are probably the number one person that comes to mind when someone says about evolution in their character and in wrestling. You have managed to reinvent yourself again and again and again, which is impressive in its own right. But the fact that you've managed to be able to do it and have so many new iconic catchphrases without it ever feeling forced, how do you do that? How do you get a feeling at some point where you say, you know what, this is feeling stale, this is feeling old, I need to change something up? Or does something come to you and that's when you're just like, hey, that came to me, so let's rock and roll with that?
I mean, you never really know what's going to hit when you try different catchphrases. And the best way for them to work is just be organic. You'll say something and then it works. Like, for example, last night when I said, you can't win the big one. And in this company, I am the big one. And I went afterwards, you kind of always peruse social media to see what people liked, what they didn't like, and you take it with a grain of salt. But what I noticed was a lot of people were saying the big one, hashtag the big one. And I was like, well, there you go. That's it right there. It's organic. It's real. If I decide to continue with that, I can. So, I mean, it just depends on what the situation is. And also it's all up to me. Like if I decide I want to get something over, I'll stick with it until I do. And it's usually easier to do that as a heel because you can have people go, oh, that's so stupid. Like, the list of Jericho. If you try to do this as a baby face, you might not even be able to pull it off. But when you're a heel, you have no rules. So I find most of the catchphrases that I come up with is when I'm a heel, because then you get them over. And then when you turn babyface again, everyone thinks they're great. Yeah. When you're a babyface, although Eddie Kingston doesn't know what a babyface is, apparently. Last night he asked what a babyface was. A good guy, a fan favorite, if you're reading a Pro Wrestling Illustrated magazine. You have a little bit more restraints upon you, but you still can do it. You just have to be completely confident and, what's the word I'm looking for? You got to really be into it. And if you can really commit to that, you can get it over as well. So it all depends on the performer. And it all depends on how much of a level of commitment you want to give to it. But you also have to realize sometimes you got to cut bait. This one's probably not going to work. Let's come up with something else.
So, you mentioned babyface and heel and all of that. So what I found interesting with your career as well is while you have reinvented yourself so many times, you haven't necessarily had to reinvent yourself to switch from a fan favorite to a non-fan favorite, a villain, if you will. How do you ever, when you're doing that, do you ever worry? Because I've always heard, a true heel isn't trying to be funny, isn't trying to get over, isn't trying to get someone to cheer them. They really want people to hate them. Have you ever, at this point in your career, was there a time where you're ever like, man, like I'm doing everything as dastardly as I can, but these people, I've done this for so long that they respect me so much that's almost making being the bad guy difficult? Or is it just all part of it? No?
No, absolutely not. I mean, if you're a great pro wrestler, and some people consider me to be a great pro wrestler, you can do both. I've never been of the mindset that, well, a good heel's a good heel, but he's not a good babyface. You need to be able to do both, and you should be able to do both. And you need to read the room, so to speak. And anytime you see me turn from babyface to heel or heel to babyface, it's because I'm starting to pick up what the audience is thinking, even before they even know it. And if you think, oh, Jericho's full of shit, you can look at Stone Cold Steve Austin and Bret Hart, the famous WrestleMania 13 double turn, where they both knew that Bret was already a heel and Steve was already a babyface, but the crowd didn't know it yet until they did the switch. And then everybody was like, of course, it's perfect, makes perfect sense. I've done that my whole career. I always know when it's time to turn either way. And when you do turn, you always have to have some subtle differences or some obvious differences to let people know that there's been a change. If you're, a good guy one week and a bad guy the next, but you're wearing the same tights and have the same demeanor and the same music and the same catchphrases and everything's the same, well, what's the difference? The side of the locker room that you come out of? That doesn't really make a difference. So there has to be some sort of either major shift or subtle undertones, depending how talented of a performer you are, kind of judges how subtle you can make things. I can turn people at the drop of a dime. I mean, you saw MJF do that last night. He's very good at it as well. You didn't think, oh, how's MJF going to turn the crowd? Well, he did a great job of it. I can do the same, and I have before. Last night's promo with Eddie Kingston, with 2 or 3 more sentences far left or far right, I could have turned the whole crowd heel on me. That's a good thing. That's what wrestling's all about, is the story and the characters, not the matches and the moves.
It's really interesting. One thing I wanted to ask you probably falls to the very bottom of the importance list as far as my questions. But one of the looks that you had that you've changed up, obviously now you're back to, you've got the long hair. Your hair in 2008 to 2015-ish, I remember personally being a fan and going, that's something I'd like to do, make my hair stand up real well. Didn't happen. Couldn't get it to do it. Is there a secret? What type of, you had to have been using some sort of product. How did you do that managed to just stay up?
So what I actually was doing was I actually brought back the old hair straightener that I used to have in the 80s. And you'd wash your hair and then it would dry kind of flat. And then you'd take a towel and rub it. And then it would stick up kind of like a rooster. And then you'd take the straightener and straighten a bit of it. Then maybe put a little bit of, it's not mousse, it's hair sculpting cream or whatever, sculpting cream. Put a little bit down the tips and then just hairspray it. And that would basically be it. And you either, once you had the hair straightener, you would know, okay, this is going to be a good hair day, or this is going to be a bad hair day. You know what I mean? And sometimes because we were on the road so much, and you only trust a certain person to cut your hair.
Sure. And
sometimes I wouldn't be able to get in. So you could always tell that it had been a long time if it was really long and like rooster sticking up, because that's just, I just had to get it cut, but I couldn't, find my hairdresser to do it. Wow. But, yeah, it was quite the task for sure. You have to spend a little bit of time on that in the morning.
Yeah. And it's funny because, when we're talking about the different versions of Chris Jericho, that was distinct, but man, you go back to 99 and your hair with the, have it, the Gene Simmons, kind of on top of the head there. So you always have kind of been able to take everything from your attire to literally your facial hair, the hair on top of your head, and figured out a way to make that a specific era of Chris Jericho. And I think that's really interesting.
Well, I mean, I've said it before. It all stems from David Bowie, basically, in that I'm a huge Bowie fan, but not so much like the deep cuts, but just the concept of Bowie, and that he always looked different every album. And he always had a different character: Aladdin Sane, Ziggy Stardust, the Thin White Duke, the Tin Machine, the Let's Dance Dave. It was always something. And you could look at him and go, like, if you wanted to dress up as Bowie on Halloween, you would have a dozen different choices that you could pick where people go, oh, that's David Bowie. Yeah. I kind of wanted to do the same for me as Chris Jericho. And it's funny because every Halloween, I always go through Instagram where I'm tagged and I pick out the costumes and post them. And there usually be a good 30 or 40. And a lot of them are different. There'll be some pain makers. There'll be some Gene Simmons early 2000s Jericho. There'll be some suit and tie guy Jericho. There'll be some Le Champion Jericho. I mean, there's a lot of different eras that you can choose from. And that I take great pride in that, because you're always keeping people guessing, and you're never getting stale and stagnant. And when you're on TV every week or twice a week, like AEW is now, you have to keep things changing and different, or else it just becomes nostalgia. And I never want to be a nostalgia act, and I never will be.
I was having a conversation with Sean Waltman the other day, actually, on one of these Fight and Focuses, and we were talking about that, about how it's, for somebody to be a nostalgia act really does speak to, in one sense, the what a great career they had, right? That they do have the ability to just walk out there and have people cheer them because they're remembering the good old days. But at the same time, as he had put it, you get that excitement, that pop, and then it almost turns sad after a while. I thought that was really interesting the way he explained it. And it's something that I think, you are the prime example of somebody who has not allowed that to happen. I think that's really cool. Moving on to March 6th, AEW Revolution. We now know it is going to be you versus Eddie Kingston. What about this match? You've had so many different matches in your storied career, and so many different style of matches already in your career in AEW. What are you most looking forward to about a match with a guy like an Eddie Kingston? And I don't want to just strictly say he's a brawler, because he definitely has a lot more.
I don't even know what that means. No, I guess I can just cut you off right there. I hate the term brawler. I don't even know what a brawler is. Who's a brawler? Bruiser Brody? What does that mean? It means he has great fucking matches every night. I don't know if that's a brawler, a high flyer. I don't know. You tell me. But my point is, they're either good matches or they're bad matches. I never categorize anybody, because wrestling is wrestling. And you have to be able to do all different styles to be a great worker. I find in AEW, one of the kind of things that's been misconstrued is that a good match is in accordance to how many high-flying high spots there are. Now, obviously, there's a place for that, just like there's a place for a death match and there's a place for a cage match. But to me, what is a 5-star match? And that's what grips the crowd, both in storytelling and in delivery. I knew from the start that Eddie Kingston and I would be able to create something that's a little bit different from the norm, that's a little bit more intense, because there is a little bit of dislike between us. There has been since day one. Now we're both professionals and we work together, but I really don't like him. And I'm not saying that as a gimmick or a work. I just don't care for the guy as a person. I feel he's a bleeding heart with the smallest violin. I had so many hardships and bullshit. We all had hardships, and basically what I said in my promo last night about him, I really believe I'm not saying he's a failure. I think he believes he's destined to be a failure because of his lineage. I said from the start that he had what it took to be a top guy, and I was right. But I also said that he can't handle the pressure of being the top guy. He can't handle the pressure of going to the top of the mountain, because if he ever made it, he would crumble and fall off the other side. I think he's got that achievemophobia, which is actually a word. I didn't just make it up. He's afraid of success. He fears success. I've never had that, because I've been on top of the wrestling world in different countries since I was 22 years old, on the cover of every Mexican wrestling magazine in 1993. Google it. I wasn't making that up. So I think there is some jealousy there with Eddie Kingston, but I also knew it would be very intense and it would be different. Now, when you talk about the match, I expect it to be very hard-hitting. I expect it to be very impactful, because there is some real-life animosity between us. So if you want to call that brawling, or you want to call that just a hard-hitting fight, or you want to call it a fisticuffs, or whatever you want to call it, I think it's going to be different from everything else on the show. I'm not a technically advanced wrestler like Daniel Bryan. We know that Eddie Kingston isn't. I'm not a high flyer like Phoenix is, and Eddie Kingston isn't either. But both of us know how to have a great match, and both of us have had many great matches. Me way more than him, because I've been doing it at the highest of levels for so many years. So I'm expecting it to be a show stealer, but in a completely different way than someone who's rating matches by how many high spots there are. I don't think there's going to be a lot of high spots with Eddie Kingston and Chris Jericho. I think there's going to be a lot of animosity, a lot of hard hitting. Violence is cliched, but I think it's going to be a fight that everybody can feel while they're watching. And there's a difference between a match you can feel and a match that you can stand up and cheer for, because it blows your mind from an athletic standpoint. There is a difference between the two.
You mentioned being on the magazines in Mexico, and that's a great transition into a question that I did want to ask you. Obviously,
that's why
AEW Plus here. What's that?
That's why I said it.
There you go.
Waiting for this question.
I appreciate it. So AEW Plus on FITE, that is where, and we ask everybody on FITE, go right now, check on your app to see the availability in your market for AEW Plus. Ton of fans. We have a ton of European fans on AEW Plus on FITE. Canadian fans, obviously you are proud to be Canadian. So one of the things I wanted to ask about that for that audience that's watching this right now, what are some of your favorite venues to perform outside of the U.S., be it wrestling or be it music as well? Are there any fans that there's one specific venue itself, the actual physical building, or the fans in that area that come that you really just, when you're going on tour there?
The thing about AEW is that we really started and came into prominence probably about 6 months into the pandemic, 6 months into the lockdown. I think that's when people started realizing these guys are the real deal, because the stories that we were telling in front of no people that were still great stories and still drawing lots of viewers at home.
Sure.
So there's a huge world out there. Canada, for one. Oh my gosh, when we first hit Canada, think of where we could go in Toronto. Think about Winnipeg. I mean, the two top guys in the company, two of the top guys, Chris Jericho and Kenny Omega, we're from Winnipeg. Hello, we're just waiting for that. London. I mean, the Khan family has a huge stake in London, as does wrestling. And when Fozzy was over there in December, so many people were asking, when is AEW coming over? So specific venues, I mean, it depends on the crowd, but London is a great city. Glasgow is a great city. And these are both for Fozzy and for wrestling. Toronto, Winnipeg, Tokyo. I love wrestling in Japan. It's one of my favorite places in the world. Mexico City, another great place to wrestle. Sydney, Australia, Melbourne, Australia. All of these places all across the world are Manchester, England, Birmingham, England. They're just great wrestling towns. They're great Fozzy towns. So I can't wait. Like I said, we were fortunate enough to be able to make it back to England with Fozzy, the UK, Ireland, Scotland, Wales. Dublin's a great city to work in. Belfast too. And just to go, and every single show was sold out. People were ready to come and be a part of something again, similar to what's been happening in the States. Mm-hmm. So as soon as the UK opens, that's going to be huge for us. As soon as Japan opens up a little bit more, I can see a huge New Japan versus AEW super show. And like I said, Canada is a complete no-brainer, because I think there's probably 6 or 7 cities there that we could do huge business in, because I believe that on TSN, the Canadian Sports Network, our ratings are the highest wrestling ratings out of any company, AEW Dynamite. So the people are ready for us to go there as well. So, and we're excited too, because then also on top of that, there's so many places we haven't even been in the States yet.
But sure, I was going to say the West Coast.
The West Coast, I mean, the Pacific Northwest, and there's so many places that we haven't been. And the reason for that is because 3 months after we started, we were wrestling in Jacksonville for 8 months straight. And thank goodness we were able to do that, and it was awesome. But once we started going back on the road again, and once crowds started coming back, and it didn't take long, we realized there is a lot of places that haven't seen us yet, and we are ready to go, because we got everything organized with the stories, the talent. We've got the greatest roster in the world today. It's going to be an explosion when we finally do get a chance to hit some of these cities and some of these countries that we've never been to before.
Yeah, it's really fascinating when, I had the opportunity to be there at the first Dynamite to host a Fight and Focus there. And the pandemic really created this time warp, I feel like, for all of us, where we can't really place what was when. But it is fascinating
Right.
when you look at the fact that how quickly we went from the debut of Dynamite into the pandemic when you were at Daly's Place, as you mentioned. And you look at how big AEW has become, how worldwide, how international AEW has become. And then you factor in that you really haven't gone anywhere. You really physically have not gone anywhere of all the places where you could go. And that, if nothing else, man, is that an exciting thing to look forward to in the future with AEW? Because, yeah, you haven't even scratched the surface, and look what AEW's done so far.
Well, yeah, and like I said, what we did do was something that nobody could have predicted. Nobody knew what a lockdown was, or I remember, when we first heard of it, it was the 2 week flatten the curve, and then it was like a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4. I'm like, oh my gosh, what the hell's going on? And we had to, hit the ground running. What do? We did 4. I remember that's how I started commentating, was in Atlanta. At QT Marshall's wrestling school. We converted it into an ipso facto television studio and filmed 26 matches in one day. Because after that, at midnight, the whole state was locked down, as was Florida. And we're like, what are we going to do? We got 4 weeks here. Man. Actually, I think Tony's original plan was to have 6. But after 4, then we were allowed to go back to Jacksonville with no crowd. Now, people say when we started that, I feel so bad for the young guys, working in front of no crowd. I was like, screw the young guys. I feel bad for me. I've been working in front of thousands of people a night for the last 25 years. These guys are used to wrestling in front of 50 people. It's okay for them, because then what happened is when you start wrestling, and it's a famous story that I tell when I was wrestling Orange Cassidy, after the match, he's go, did I sell that move too long? And I was like, I don't know. Because with no crowd there, there's nothing to judge it by.
Yeah.
The crowd dictates what we do. Contrary to popular belief, the idea that wrestling is all scripted is not the case. So much of it involves the fans and how they react. And it was very hard to kind of restructure ourselves. And it was disheartening too. After 3 or 4 months, I was like, am I even still over anymore? Like if a crowd showed up today, would they even remember us? And of course they did. And it was awesome once they started coming. But for the longest time, it was very strange, but we put on a great show every week. Our stories were amazing, and we adapted Stadium Stampede and everything in between. We took the pandemic, we took the negative of the pandemic and almost turned it into a positive. And I think that really cemented us with our fans and all the new fans who came to check us out. And as a result, we're still, and now more than ever, the hottest wrestling company in the world today.
We talked about the roster a couple of times. We alluded to them. Is there anyone on the roster that you would tell fans, keep an eye out for them in the future? This is going to be a star. This is someone that maybe we're not quite, maybe the fans aren't seeing it yet, but somebody that like you are able to see it.
My track record is pretty good. Like I said, Eddie Kingston is already a big star, but he's only scratching the surface. I think MJF, when he finally turns babyface for real, is going to be one of the biggest in history. I think Danny Garcia, I think 2.0. I think all 3 of those are underrated. Obviously, Darby is amazing, and Jungle Boy is amazing, but they still haven't even scratched the surface. Sammy Guevara hasn't even scratched the surface. So there's a lot of Dante Martin, Darius Martin when he comes back. There's so many guys. Will Hobbs. I think Will Hobbs and Ricky Starks. These guys are all future main eventers, and I'm rarely wrong when I make these predictions because I can always spot a main event guy. Malachi Black, the moment he came in, I was like, how did they ever let this guy go? He's got it all. And once again, we're just kind of starting back in. Keith Lee. I don't think Keith Lee realizes 10% of how good he is at this point in time because no one's ever helped him and no one's ever told him. He's just gone out there on his own and done his thing, and people cheered and he thought that was over. That's not over. He has so much potential, such a bougie word, but he's got so much inside of him that we haven't seen yet. Let me put it that way. So it's fun for me to see these guys and girls come in and go, oh my gosh, like there is something here that is just going to blow the roof off when these people are. Anna Jade Cargill. How good are Anna and Jade? And I think they both have had like 25 matches each.
Right? Yeah.
Now imagine how much better they're going to be when they hit 100 matches and hit 100 promos. They don't even know anything about promos just yet. They think they do, but wait until they really figure it out. They're going to be 2 of the greatest possibly ever women's wrestlers. So you can see them come in. And that's one thing I loved about AEW from the start is everybody was so untapped raw talent that I was like, oh my gosh, like when me get my hands on them, and now you bring in Daniel Bryan and CM Punk and these other guys with years and years and years of experience, it's just going to be a pleasure to watch them all grow. And if you think the company is big now, wait until some of these guys hit as megastars, and then it's a completely different ball game.
So my last question for you, and again, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I know you're busy.
No problem, man. My pleasure.
What do you feel, and this is such like a vague question, but what do you feel you have left to accomplish in AEW and in your career? Because you look at your body of work and you could stop right now and this is Hall of Fame, whatever Hall of Fame it is a Hall of Fame worthy career. But you also look at you out there and it really, to me at least, doesn't look like anything's winding down for you. So what do you feel you have left to accomplish, or what are your personal goals, I should ask, to accomplish in the rest of your career?
I mean, I don't have a list. There's that word again. I just know this. Probably about 2016, I thought maybe it's time to start winding down. It wasn't as fun. Then I went to Japan, Jericho versus Omega. I was like, oh, holy shit, this is amazing. Like, wrestling is fun again. And that pretty much begat AEW. That reignited my passion and fire for wrestling. And then over the last year and a half, once again, you read the room. What are people saying? What are they thinking? What am I thinking? And I realize you cannot teach experience, and you cannot teach fan manipulation. And nobody does that better than me. And I'll leave it at that. And that inspires me creatively, and it makes me more passionate and makes me realize that I'm not going anywhere because there's no reason to. I'm still one of the best in the business at what I do, which is telling stories and crowd manipulations. I can still have a great match any night of the week. I can still have the best match on the show. Not every night, but some nights. But I can always have the best story and always have the best character and have the best puppet mastering of the audience than anybody in our company and maybe even in the business. And that, to me, tells me that I'm still not even close to being done yet. And when I'm done, there's not going to be a retirement tour. There's not going to be a big pomp and circumstance. I'll be done. I'll go somewhere else and do whatever I'm going to do. But for right now, I mean, I'm in the best shape of my life.
Yeah.
We've got a really great story going on with Eddie Kingston that's got a lot of layers to come. And to me, that's enough to sit back and enjoy myself. And when I'm enjoying myself, there's no reason to change anything. Well,
I think I speak for everybody who's going to be tuning into Revolution. We're going to sit back and enjoy ourselves. The event is AEW Revolution. It comes to you live March 6th at 8 p.m. Eastern time here in the States, but internationally for our AEW Plus fans right here on FITE. Check the app for availability in your market. Chris Jericho, thank you so much. This has been an absolute pleasure to be able to talk to you. I'm excited to watch your match with Eddie Kingston. For Chris Jericho, I'm Josh Shernoff. Thank you for joining us here on Fight and Focus, and we will see you March 6th for AEW Revolution on AEW Plus on FITE.